You- Oh, okay. I trying to get you all straight here. Okay. Yeah. Well, we need to remember Larry and Helen in prayer. Larry's kind of under the weather. He had to have some work done to his ankle and stuff. And our friends are traveling. Want to remember them, man. They've traveled all over the country and went all the way to California, came back, and then they were going to White Sands and then to San Antonio and going to Florida, I think. Man, all I know is that's too much time in a car for me. I, I'm done after about 5 hours. That's Sister Hay and I. We won't be here next Wednesday, but we'll be here Sunday. But we don't even drive all the way to Phoenix. We stop halfway and get a room for the night and finish up the next day. But I want to remember them. Remember Laura in prayer. It was good to see her Sunday. I know Brother Singletary's back out of town working again, so I remember him in prayer. And of course, remember Jesse in prayer that the Lord just keep him and that we can be able to minister to him. How many know that life is like that, right? It can just be trouble sometimes and it can be hard. And I thought about uh, since I'm not going to be here next week, I wanted to get something to be a little bit easy to just do for a couple of weeks for this week and then skip a week and then we'll hopefully be able to finish it up. But I want to read this statement I put on the paper to begin with. And it says, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And the person that said that, believe it or not, was Winston Churchill. Can you imagine that? Now, most of us know, if you're older, you know that he was a key player in World War II. And you think about that, he wasn't poor, right, Brother Randy? He was not a poor person. He had plenty of money. But for somebody to make that kind of statement, and I remember when I was putting this together, and I had that quote from a long time ago, and I thought to myself, man, how true is that? You know, sometimes people define their life by their job or how much money they have and all those kind of things. And I began to think about that a lot. And I know when our kids were growing up, we were just the kids' mom and dad. That's how that worked. You know, we were Bubba's mom and dad, or Missy, or Donna's mom and dad. And when Ryan got up there and the rest of them, all of them, we were just their parents. Does that make sense? Kind of lose your identity with your kiddos. And then I began to think about as you transition into work, how many know people know you by your job? You might be a carpenter, or you might be a plumber, or you might own a business, or you might have all these different titles that we have. And then I began to think about it. How many know you can have all the money in the world and still be in trouble? Still not really understand about life and really not understand and really living involves more than making a living. There's just so much truth to that. And one of the illustrations I had when I first went to work at the steel mill, there's a man that worked there, and that guy worked so much overtime. I mean, he worked every hour. Of course, Brother Hay hadn't been married very long, so I wasn't interested in a lot of overtime. Only time I worked overtime was holidays because they paid me double time and a half, and I was always lowest on the thing for how much overtime I had. So whenever it came around, I always got to work those days because they have to ask the person that has the least amount of overtime first. They have to offer it to them in a union situation like that. And so those are the days where Hay worked, but this man worked all the time. And when he wasn't working, he was working on a house. He had 8 or 9 kids, and his whole goal was to build this house and to have this house done and have it built debt free. So the way it worked, he worked all them hours, he bought the materials he needed, and he worked on the house. Of course, he had kids to help him work on the house too. I'm not sure what their ages was, but I remember working there with him for a little over a year, and then all of a sudden one day he wasn't at work. And you had to know this guy's like, whoa, there's something real wrong. And then I found out he passed away. And all that time he spent working in order to achieve those things, how many know immediately it makes you think about the Bible verse where the guy did the exact same thing? He had this big harvest, right? And he said, well, I'm just going to make me some bigger barns and I'm going to be good to go. And then his soul was required that very night and didn't do him any good. And I thought a lot about that. And sometimes I'm a firm believer in this. I believe God teaches us practical lessons. Now, we don't always learn them. We don't always pay attention to them. We're always not always, how can I say it in a politically correct way? We're not always aware of God teaching them to us. But I remember we had a foster daughter one time, and y'all know how crazy the weather can be here in New Mexico. And I told her to get a jacket that morning to go to school, and she told me she didn't need a jacket. I said, I'm telling you, you need to get a coat because it was one of those New Mexico days where it said it's going to start out this cold. And how many know it don't always get warmer here? Lots of times it gets colder throughout the day. And I remember her calling me at lunchtime and saying, hey, you need to bring me a jacket. I said, no, I'm not bringing you a jacket. Boy, that's mean, right? It's just terrible for Brother Hay to say that. But what Brother Hay means by learning through practical experience is, she the next time when I told her to get a jacket, how many know she got her jacket? She learned, and I told her, I said, listen, you need to listen to people that are looking out for your best interests. Those are practical things that we learn. And a lot of times that is the best teacher. It's not anything that's going to hurt us, not anything like that. God wouldn't do that. He don't tempt us with evil. But there's a lot of practical things along the way that God teaches us life lessons with. And how many agree with me? We probably glossed over a lot of them. We just go right by them, right? And I remember my grandpa used to tell me all the time. He'd say, "Yep, don't have time to do it right the first time, but I promise you, you're going to have time to do it right the second time." Because guess what? If you don't do the job the way you're supposed to, guess what happens? You got to redo that crazy thing. And now you spent twice as much time as if you'd have just done it right the first time. How many have ever tried to carry in too many bags of groceries at one time? Well, I think most of us guys in here, maybe some of the ladies, but Tanya's the world's worst at this. She always tries to carry more. She's laughing, but it's true. She always tries to carry more she can handle. I tell her all the time, Tanya, make 2 trips. It's a whole lot better. But man, we think we can do it right until the bag breaks. And then we got to pick everything up. It would have been a lot easier just to take 2 trips. And those are practical ways of learning how to do stuff. And with our kids, one of the best things we can teach them is some of those practical experiences. But how many know we're still God's children? And God treats us and teaches us life lessons along the way through practical things. In Brother Hayes' experience, I never forgot that man that worked all them hours to build that house. And when he was getting ready to move in it, at first when he didn't show up at work, I thought that, oh, wow, they're probably moving in because he had said that they were pretty much done, but he never got to move in that house. And, we had that happen here with one of the dairy farmers, big dairy farmer. If you go on your way to Mushu, that big house on the right hand side, that was the owner's dream home. And it's so pretty, right? Beautiful home. And they never got to live in it. Their life was taken in a car accident. And, they never were able to do that. So the practical side of this that we need to understand is that we have to make sure our priority list is where it should be. Lots of times when I talk to young parents, I'll tell them all the time, I go, hey, you better enjoy them while they're little because it's not going to be very long before they're going to be really a lot bigger. And you might not enjoy them as much then. And then it'll just be a short period of time when you'll be missing them altogether. You'll be missing them tracking mud into the house. You'd be missing them doing the little things, and all of a sudden, you spend your time being aggravated and upset about all these little things. But in the big picture, does it really even matter? And so when we're talking about trying to learn and trying to learn things in life and understand exactly how life works, God is real good about helping us. And so again, I just want to remind you that when it talks about giving, how many know Brother Hayes not talking about money? How many know we give a lot more valuable things than money in our life? We don't realize it at the time sometimes. We don't realize how important it is. I know just with that little one that was here, little Charlie, Sister Hayes' little friend, if Wanda was here tonight, she just loves that little girl with everything that's in her every time she sees her. And, I don't know if she just triggers something in Sister Wanda, probably that mother instinct kind of thing. But I promise you, long after them having hot dogs on Wednesday night or pizza on Wednesday night or going to McDonald's after church or whatever, we do with the kids. Long after that's all gone, she'll remember Sister Hay holding her. She'll remember her taking time and touching her. And the most valuable thing we have is our time. I mean, no, we just have a finite amount of that. It's the most valuable thing you have. And so part of this life that we give is how we give, and what we do and how that should be looked at is, hey, can I make a difference? I used to tell my kids all the time, growing up in a pastor's house is difficult. I'll just tell you straight up. And Mike, that comes sometimes with Dora, he grew up in a pastor's home, and his dad was really, really strict. And a lot of the people that come off and on that grew up in pastors' homes didn't have the greatest experience with their parents. And we'll just leave it at that. Because sometimes, if you're a pastor's kid, how many know people are looking to get you in trouble? And sometimes, I hate to say it, sometimes pastors overcorrect their own children. And you have to be real cautious with that. Now, you still have to hold them accountable. That's what I have to tell Sister Hay about Brandon. He's the greatest kid in the world, but he's still got to be held accountable. So when we look at all this kind of stuff that's going on in our life, then we need to ask that really difficult question. What do I have that I can give to somebody else? And like I said, how many know sometimes you can go to Walmart and just smile at somebody? How many know that cashier needs that? The other night I had to go to McDonald's, and I've never had as bad as experience as I had the other night. Sister Hay always has those experiences, and I don't usually ever have any problems there. But them kids were so messed up, and they gave me the wrong order 3 times after I went through the drive-through. So I got out after the third time and went in there, and oh man, it was like chaos in there. And there's a little young lady that was trying to run the shift, I guess, and a big old guy giving her grief, and she was telling him to go home, and you can imagine where that was going, right? And no wonder there was a lot of chaos in that situation. But one of the things that I think we got to get to where we can teach people is we have to teach them not only to be patient, but to understand that when people are in the midst of all this turmoil, how many know the last thing they need is to be poked again? The last thing they need is to be kicked again. If somebody is sick, how many know they need to be lifted up? They need to be encouraged. They need to have somebody on their side. Somebody living in a bad home situation, Brother Hay promises you that that's the last thing they need is for the church not to be doing. So I always kind of wanted to start out that way and kind of introduce the lesson with that statement by Winston Churchill. And it's so true. And, we do make our living by what we get. How many are glad you get paid for your job? I I remember when Brother O'Neill was alive and he was still working at a steel mill. He had a bumper sticker, and you know what it said? He said he got paid weekly, and then it was a play on words, very weekly. In other words, he's saying, "Yeah, I get my check every week, but it's not much of a check." And you think about that, right? How many feel that way a lot of times? So when we're talking about these kind of things in church, and we're trying to introduce it, and we're trying to introduce it to our young people, we need to teach them that the most valuable things isn't just accumulating wealth. How many of us in here, we're all older, except for Tanya and Kaylee. But, and I know if Eileen and Leo were here, they'd be younger, but even in their case, how many people don't understand that the accumulation of wealth isn't always the answer? You know, I always laugh when people say, man, if I win the lottery, here's my list. How many know that if they win the lottery, that's not going to be their list? How many think it's going to change pretty quick? And how many of those lottery tickets, they used to do a show every so often for a long time. They had a series about what happened to all these lottery winners. And a lot of them, 5 years after they won these big lotteries, their life was a total shambles. Divorced, their families didn't talk to them anymore. They were in debt. In some cases, everything that they obtained through those winnings was gone. And a lot of people think, well, if I just had a little more money, things would be better. So I just want you to kind of keep that in mind. Now, here's Acts 20:34 is where we're going to start. It's on your paper. So if Kaylee gets it up there, fine. If not, it's okay. It says, you know that these hands of mine have worked to supply my own needs and even the needs of those who were with me. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is we have to start with our own needs. And I'm a firm believer in this. I believe God gives us abilities, He gives us talents, He gives us things that we can do. And this is the Apostle Paul talking. The first part of Acts has to do with Peter. The second part of Acts, the second half, it makes a change. It's all about Paul. And one of the things that's happening here is Paul makes this statement. He says, look, you know what? He said, I met my own needs through my hands. In other words, he worked to supply what he needed. And not only for his, but for those that were with him. And how many know before you can help somebody else, how many know you got to help yourself? If you're always in that place where you're not willing to do what is necessary to meet your own needs, and see, that's why Brother Hay said we got to contrast not only the money side, but now we got to contrast the spiritual side with this. And I want you to think about it. Paul understood in what he was trying to teach those around him. If you go back into church history, and remember I said this Sunday morning, it breaks my heart we don't know church history. And our kids really don't know church history. I mean, it's really bad for our children. If the church ever did one thing, we need to start focusing on that so the kids can understand that. But here's the Apostle Paul, and what he is saying is, look, I know that he could have done what they were doing in Jerusalem. Anybody remember what happened in Jerusalem? They had all things common. They tried socialism. Really, that's the bottom line. The Bible has a lot to say about that, by the way. They had a lot in common, and what people did is they sold stuff and they brought things in. How many remember that was one of the first arguments in the church? One group thought that their widows were not being taken care of as good as a different group of widows. And one of the first things that happened in the church was because of all those things, a lot of people quit their jobs, stopped working, stopped providing for their own needs. How many know that only lasts for so long? And you can try this, and it's been tried since the beginning of time. And the reason it don't work, it's contrary to the rules that God has established. I promise you that. God always has said, and we'll talk about that, some of that here in a minute. God's always established that that's not the way it should be. And what happens is, so you sell all this property. How many know some people probably have property to sell? But what about all the people that didn't have property to sell? And you can imagine the turmoil that started going on there. And we know that the second part of this was when all of a sudden persecution came in, how many know the church was scattered all over? But part of the reason why it was scattered all over is because they had to go get jobs and they had to find work and they had to find a way to supply their needs. And the reason why Brother Hay is saying that is, how many agree with me that there's a whole group of people in our country even that think everybody else owes them a living? And I'm not trying to be mean about that, but Christians need to recognize that. We'll talk about helping people and all the things. And the reason Brother Hay is doing this is one of those things that I struggle with. I'm a firm believer in helping people and all that, and we'll talk about it. But I also understand what Paul was trying to teach here. Paul was trying to teach that, hey, you can't just take all the time and not be a giver. And part of this giving, like I said, how many know it would have been okay? Let's just say they had all these things together. If they worked together and grew a garden, and if you go back and study our history as a country, that's what the Pilgrims tried. And they tried having everything together. Well, you had some people that worked real hard. And how many know you had some people that didn't pull their weight? It's called human nature, right? And so what ended up happening, the whole thing almost fell apart until all of a sudden they began to realize, wait a minute, less people sell what they grow. And next thing you know, the person that sold the vegetables sold it to the guy that made whatever stuff they needed, clothes, whatever. And somebody sold it for their labor to help work the fields. And next thing you know, our country started to flourish. But before that, that place was almost bankrupt. So if you can imagine a church, and Michael and I was talking about this the other day, Brother Hayes known a lot of pastors that go to a church. Church has a lot of money in savings. How many know they're happy to be there? As long as there's enough money in the savings and what's coming in to keep the salary paid. But if those savings aren't getting replaced, anybody know what happens after a while? You run out. And then when the money's all gone, what are you going to do? I tell you what most of them do. They go somewhere else, and the people get stuck trying to make ends meet. Does that make sense? And the next guy that comes in. Whereas if everybody kept working while the savings were high, how many know you could add to the savings, but you'd have something to carry you through those dry times? And you say, well, Brother, hey, why does God have it? This is a principle from God's word forever. If you remember all the way back in the Old Testament, when the Jews first ended up in Egypt, anybody remember what happened there? There's a big old drought. You remember that? And he had a dream, the king did. And how did he interpret the dream? 7 years of plenty, 7 years not so much. So we need to store this up for those 7 lean years, right? They never stopped working. And I promise you, in those lean years, they still had a harvest, but it wasn't the bountiful harvest. And if they wouldn't have stayed that stocked up, how many know they would have starved to death? And so God's always had this principle. And part of the way this works in our life, and the reason I want to talk about the spiritual side, this is real important. There are people that want to pray for somebody, but if you're not in a place spiritually to believe God, how many know you can almost do more harm than good when you pray for somebody? And I always say this to people. God moves by our faith in him. And I understand that. There are people that worship faith. That's a bridge too far. But if you're in a spiritual place where you're prayed up and you're trusting God, how many know it's okay and a lot easier to pray for that person that's sick? Right? Now, anybody in here disagree with this statement? It's always easier to pray for the other person when they're sick. How hard is it to pray for yourself? It's always easier to believe for the other person, right? How hard is it to believe for yourself? And when we go through them struggles, at least ways in Brother Hayes' mind, when we go through those struggles, one of the things that God is trying to teach us spiritually is if we give to people, we can get to a place where you can give everything away But if you don't replenish your side, your spiritual side, how many know it's going to run dry too? So how do we do that? We have to read God's word. We have to know God's word. We have to live it. And here's where people are going to probably disagree with me. And if you're watching online, I can answer your questions. Just have to email Brother Hay, and I'll answer them for you. And it's real simple, pastorhay@hotmail.com. I never mind answering. When I get those questions, I always answer them. But here's what I want you to just start thinking about a little bit. We have to be in a place where we're prayed up where we need to be. So when we're going through those dry times, somebody else will be in a spiritual place where they have an abundance and they can pray for us. And how many know all of a sudden we're both better off? But if everybody's walking through the same dry patch, how hard is it to trust God? So when you think about what was going on in Egypt, if they wouldn't have had some stuff stored up, who knows what could have happened? Because we know what happens when somebody has something. I told Michael this once, and I know he mentions it every once in a while when he was preaching during the 2YK thing when everybody thought the world was going to end, and all these churches were selling these kits and all this crazy stuff was going on. And I told him, I said, look, God's took care of me this far. I'm trusting him to take care of me. I said, I'm not buying those kits. I'm not doing any of that. And I told Michael, I said, but here's something I want to tell you. If you're the only person with food on the block, how many know you better be prepared to guard that food, to protect that food? Because how many know when people get hungry, they're going to do those kind of bad things. So we got to be careful. And I hate to tell you this, when someone's struggling spiritually, the reason why you need to be prayed up, because sometimes when people are struggling spiritually, how many know they lash out at you? And you have to be able to be in a place where you can overcome that. And so I kind of get excited about it. And here's what it says in Thessalonians, and hopefully it'll kind of bring the first point together for us. It says, and this is 2 Thessalonians 3:7. For you yourselves know how you ought to follow our example. We were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's food without paying for it. On the contrary, we worked night and day, laboring and toiling, so that we would not be a burden on any of you. We did this not because we do not have a right to such help, but in order to offer ourselves as a model for you to imitate. For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule: the one who is unwilling to work shall not eat. Now, we need to understand that being a burden to somebody can be more than just a physical, hey, I need some money kind of thing. Like Berhe already said, we understand the physical side of that, right? But on the flip side of that, the spiritual side is just as important. And it goes back to the original statement that we made. We we get these things, and how we make our living is how we get our wealth, all those kind of things. But really, our life is about how we give. That defines who we are. And so when I think about what's going on here, Paul, when the church first started, how many know that a lot of those people didn't have a lot? And Paul said, look, I'm not going to be a burden on the church. I'm going to work. I'm going to supply my own needs. I'm going to do everything I can. And here's the thing: how many of you have ever heard this preached in churches? We hear it all the time. We hear that the workman is worthy of his hire. In other words, if somebody works for you, you should pay them, right? You shouldn't cheat them out of their money. You should be honest with them. You should pay them what it's worth. Now, on the flip side of that, a lot of pastors will make that. And I went to Florida one time. I was down there, and I'd been preaching at some places, and I went to preach at a pretty good sized church, and there was a lot of issues going on. And the pastor had been at this church for, I can't remember, 15 or 20 years, a long time. And he had got several raises, obviously, over the years. And they had went into a building program. They built a new facility, a new building, and all those kind of things. And it wasn't Church of God, it was Assembly of God. And he done all these things. Well, him and the church board got contrary of each other because basically he told them that he needed more money. He had to have more money. Well, how many know when you first build a building, unless the Lord just blesses you with a lot and you're able to pay for it as you go, how many know there's a lot of debt there? There's a lot of money required to pay that debt. How many know you build a bigger building and we just paid half of our insurance for this year, and it was like $7,400 for 6 months. About freak brother hey out. And I remember when our insurance was $1,800 a year, and we thought that was ridiculous. But when you have bigger buildings, how many know everything goes up? The light bill goes up, the gas bill goes up, the insurance goes up, all those things go up. And what happened with this pastor and the boards told him, look, we can't really give you any more than what we have. And so what ended up happening, he got pretty upset with them, and he ended up leaving there and going somewhere else. And he made a lot less money at the other place. It's kind of funny. I preached for him in both places, but I remember that to this day. You remember what Brother Hayes said about practical lessons? I still think to this day he should have stayed and shared the burden with them. And how many know after a year or two, when everything settled out, how many know that they probably could have paid him more money? And there's no reason. That's what Paul is saying here. Look, we know that we're doing all these things for you, and we are ministering to you, and it's okay for us to be paid by you, but we don't want to be a burden. And so a lot of times what we find out, even in churches, a lot of people, they come in and the bathrooms are clean. And man, that's a good thing, right? But how many know somebody had to clean them? So if you pay somebody, that usually the first people that get hired is somebody for music in the youth and somebody cleaning the bathrooms. That's usually the first two positions that become paid. And because nobody really wants to do that. But here's Brother Hayes' point. Years ago, I read this book, and it was kind of a big movement. I can't remember if it started in Norway or Sweden, but anyway, this guy pastored a huge church. And sort of what he came up with was he taught on this idea of ministering to people by trying to lighten their burdens. So, what they did is, for example, they would go into a restaurant and they would actually help people in that restaurant clean bathrooms, help them in the making sure that everything was took care of. Some cases helping them cook. Some cases just being a waiter. Some cases helping them wash dishes. Some cases just doing all those things. And what happened was there were so many people that were won to the Lord because all of a sudden they were putting on display, and this is going to be Brother Hayes' theme this week and next, not next week, but the following week. The only way we can really do and give the way we're supposed to is, first of all, we have to have a relationship with Christ, and we have to do things out of love. How many know when you love somebody, you do things for them that you won't do for anybody else? Am I telling you the truth? We will, because you love that person, right? They could do things and say things that you wouldn't allow anybody else to say to you or do to you. But you love that person, and it causes you to react differently. And so what's being taught here by Paul in this situation is he not only saw those people in the Thessalonian church as someone that could meet his needs as through the ministry or for the ministry, he saw them through the eyes of Christ and he loved them. And instead of wanting to put an additional burden on them, and that's kind of what happened with that pastor, he was putting an additional burden on the church that the church just couldn't handle at that point in time. And I always wonder what would have happened, because sometimes when we go through these things, remember Brother Hayes saying it's a practical thing. It's like our foster girl never went outside when I told her, hey, you need to grab your coat. It could be 100 degrees. She'd grab her coat because she remembered that lesson she learned. It's a good thing, right? She learned something practical. And so you have to get that kind of thought process going on. And the reason Brother Hay told her to get a jacket wasn't to be mean to her. It was because I cared about her and I didn't want her to be cold. And Paul looked at this group of people and he said, look, hey, we love you. And then he gets to this point and he makes this statement. And I thought it was real interesting because it made me wonder if there were people in the church that were doing this. And he made that statement, look, you don't work, you don't need to eat. And all of a sudden you begin to think about that, right? Were there people in the church that were just living off of the church? Now, years ago, they printed a book, and I found out about it a long time ago. And I don't know if they have a newer one or updated version, but they printed a book, and people had it. And what this book said was where you could stop to get somebody to pay for a free hotel room, where you could stop and what churches would give you money for food, and where you could stop and get money for gas. So this had like this whole list of things, and people actually took that book and could travel all the way across the country and not pay anything. They just kind of took advantage of people along the way. How many know that's what is being said here? That's not who we should be. Because if we do things for people because we love them, how many know that if they loved us, then they would reciprocate those kind of things in their life towards us? So if you love the church, you're willing to work and do those kind of things and help out in the church, and you're willing to give and all the things that need to be done inside the church. If you really love the Lord, you can do those things. And I think about this example with Paul a lot. And I know it's contrary to so much stuff that goes on. And Sister Hay knows. I've had people say to me, why can't I have this? Why can't I have that? And I've told people before, well, you could. You just got to get a job, right? I can't give it to you. I don't have that kind of funds. And all of a sudden, we got to recognize that at some point in time, and I've been working with Brandon on this now pretty hard for the last month, taking responsibility and understanding that things cost. Things aren't just free. And, sometimes when you have your grandkids with you and you're kind of helping raise them, it's not a good thing because that we're way more lenient with them than we ever would have been with our own. But the flip side of that is like when little Zach comes over, he always wants to work. You know why he wants to work? Because if he works, I believe what the Bible says. If I'm going to work him, I need to pay him, right? Now, I'm not going to pay him hundreds of dollars. They don't have that kind of money. And they don't do those kind of jobs. Like we sent them out to pick up the leaves the other day. They both told us that they had them done, and I thought they did. And I took him to Walmart and let him get one of these little Lego set things he wanted. And then I went out there the other day. I told Sister Hey, I said, hey, they didn't even finish picking up them leaves. I should have checked before I paid them. But I understand that we got to teach them some of those processes. Does that make sense? And God tries to teach us. Now, the other side of this, and this is where our giving is so important. You might not have a dollar to give anybody, but you can give them a good attitude. You can smile. You can show them the right kind of things as a Christian. Now, how hard is that? Man, it's tough, right? Have you ever went somewhere and were so aggravated? I was so aggravated those people at McDonald's the other night. And then when I walked in there and I saw what was going on, Fred, I felt sorry for that little girl. I really did. I was saying to myself, this guy's this big and she's about this tall. And I'm thinking, oh man, they should never put her in that position because it's not a very good position. But she stuck to her guns and she made them go home. But by that time, how many know there was a lot of chaos going on? Now, Brother Hay, at that point in time, I could have added a lot more because I was pretty upset with them. And because it wasn't like we had a lot of stuff, it was just a Big Mac and a chicken sandwich. It wasn't like we had like this huge order or something pretty easy. And what even made it worse, the order was still sitting on the screen. They never even had made it. And I was like, ah. But you know what? I was gentle with them. I tried to show the right attitude, even though it went against me. And it was against who Brother Hay is sometimes because I believe in holding people accountable. Does that make sense? You have to. So just like with our kids, God holds us accountable. But then he puts us in these practical little places to teach us some lessons along the way. And what's always happened in Brother Hayes' life is whenever I do the right thing, how many know God always does the right thing? There's never a doubt in my mind. When our friends were here, one of the things that their son and his wife made the statement, his wife did, it's like you guys have never been apart and we hadn't seen each other. We went to see them a couple of times. They'd never made it out here. Sister Hay and I never had the money when we could have went, and then when we could go, it's just a lot of a trip, and we'll just leave it at that. But here's the thing: when she came to our house, it was like we never were apart. Does that make sense? And when we prayed with them before they left yesterday, you could feel the presence of the Lord in that room. And all of a sudden, it makes Brother Hay understand and why I came to this lesson. Lots of times we forget what binds us together is we should have the same spirit and we should have the same relationship if we say we're a Christian. Now we're in different places in our walk, right? And Brother Hayes one of them guys. I'm just who I am. I don't know how to be anything else. And Debbie laughed because her son had asked me a question. I said, look, I don't know how to do some of these other things. I only know how to do certain things. But I said, the number one thing God has always taught me is to be who I am. And when God saves you, he doesn't want you not to be who you are. You know what's interesting about this? And I know you work in construction. I know Fred's had a lot of jobs. I know Brother Randy has his job for the city. We all have different talents, right? And when God saves us, he don't take our talent away. He saves us for different aspects in different places. And in the church, how many know that the Bible talks about that the body has all these parts? And I know it sounds crazy, but anybody ever have a big toe hurting you? Have you ever stubbed your big toe? Hey, does it impact all of your body? Does it go all the way to your brain and go, hey, man, this hurts. Don't do that no more, right? And sometimes it can make you where you can't hardly walk. It hurts so bad. I think about that a lot. And there's a lot of people that look at the church and they say, well, this person is more valuable than this person. That's not how it works. God saved us because of who we are, and he uses who we are to minister to other people. In other words, Brother Hay can relate to certain people. And we were talking with the kids, and they asked me about the youth, and I told them the honest truth. Brother Hay's never been a youth director. I've never been able to work with kids. I taught a Sunday school class for little ones a few times. I took my turn in children's church once here when we were rotating children's church workers when we had a lot of kids coming. I did my time over there. I did do those kind of things, but I've never been that person because that's not who Brother Hay is. And people will say, well, that's not very nice, Brother Hay. No, I'm not saying that to be derogatory. What I'm saying is God called me and I have a different ministry. Does that make sense? And if I tried to force myself to be a youth pastor, I'm here to tell you I would fail miserably at it. Okay? When I taught school in Clovis, I taught at the high school for a few years. I figured out right away that's not the job for me. I just knew. Okay. Could I do the job? Yep. I never had a problem. Nobody ever wrote me up. I never got in trouble for not doing my job. I did everything I was supposed to, but it just wasn't the job for me. And I remember when I came over here and I taught second and third grade. Now I know that sounds kind of bad. You have these big degrees and you're teaching these little guys, right? But I know why God brought me over here. I had a little girl in my class that was, and those of you that know Tyrona, was a lot like Tyrona. And only certain people could feed her. Only certain people could do things with her because almost everybody was afraid. And for that time that I was in that classroom with that little girl, And people laugh at me when I say this, but this is how much Brother Hay believes God orders our steps. I believe I was right there for that baby, and I could feed her. And I'll never forget though, her mom and dad give her Doritos. Now we would have never give Tyrone Doritos, but she did have a little more control over her chewing, and she ate those Doritos because I think she could feel them when she swallowed, right? But she was pretty involved. And I remember when I first started working, and they told me, they said, "Hey, we don't know about this, you know," and they said they kind of put her there on purpose. And luckily, I had another teacher. There were two of us, and we had all the special needs kids in the self-contained class, and then we I taught a math class with the C-level kids, and taught an English class. And I remember thinking to myself, if for no other reason our experiences with Tyrone prepared me for that little girl. I only had her for just a short period of time, and then the family moved away at the end of that school year. But I believe that's how God works it. So you know what? He's going to give Fred different things. Larry, you have different things. You have different things. Everybody has different things. Sister Hay has different things. She can make bread and cinnamon rolls. Don't ask Brother Hay to do it. I'm not cooking that. It probably wouldn't turn out well. But here's what I know. We all have different abilities, and God wants us to do them, and we need to use them. Well, on the spiritual side, how many know some people have more patience? We used to have a lady named Margaret that was here. I promise you, that lady had more patience than any teacher I ever saw. She could teach the kids from 5 years old all the way up to 12 years old and teach that whole group, and not one of them wasn't paying attention. And she had things for this group, and things for this group, and things for this group. Plus, she was teaching a lesson, and she kept them all occupied, and she played games with them. But here's what happened: them kids loved her. And Mike Ferris, y'all keep praying for him too. He is out of the hospital and he's doing real well. I saw his grandson and he was leading singing at the church, so that's a big step for him that he's able to do that since he had a stroke. But I remember when his wife, Sister Terry, came, and I felt like she needed to teach our teenagers. Out of all the people in our church, you can remember, Brother Ray, we had a lot of people, but God put her on my heart for them kids. And I talked to her, man, she did not want to do it. And I told her, I said, well, how about ask Brother Randy? Brother Hayes real good at this. How about just doing it for a little while? Okay, Brother Randy did that for the soundboard once, and I don't know how many years you're back there, but 10 years. Yeah, Brother Hayes pretty bad at that for a while. But you did a good job, Brother Randy. And with Sister Terry, what happened was we had a rough group of teenagers then. Yeah, Ryan was in our class, but we had some rowdy boys and a few rowdy girls. Most of the girls weren't too bad, but we had a few. But we had a lot of rowdy boys at that point in time. And she taught them kids, and I promise you, she taught them for a long, long, long time. But to this day, whenever I talk to some of the kids, do you know who they ask me about? Sister Terry. Some of them didn't know she had passed away, and they still ask me about her. Can you imagine that? Do you think she had an impact on their lives? God gave her a specific calling for that specific job. I couldn't have done it. I probably would have been doing a lot of things overcorrecting. Is that a good word? I would overcorrect. And so over the years, one of the things that God has taught me is to be careful and to understand, yes, we have those things that have to be done. We all have to work, we all have to eat, we all have our skills and things that God give us to make a living. But on the flip side of that, how we give, and the most important thing you can give is you. I promise you. When they do the boys club this Saturday, there'll probably be some adults that come and help Brother Michael with the boys. Probably be some ladies that come and help Sister Sarah with that, and it's a good thing. And long after everything else is gone, they will remember that. And I know some of you might have not known this. I know Brother Randy knows, but Larry, what I do is a lot of times on Sunday morning, I give all the kids $1 put in the offering. We used to give it to them for Sunday school because I used to hate for the kids to go to Sunday school and show up. Some kids have money, some don't, right? So I made sure they all at least had $1. And at one time it was a quarter because that's all Brother Hank could afford. Now I can afford to give him $1. But there was a person that came to our church. He didn't recognize Brother Hay. I guess I lost my hair. I don't know. He didn't recognize me so much. And you know what he said to me? He said, "Hey, is that guy that still give the kids $1 for Sunday school?" I said, "Yeah, he still does that." I never told him it was me. But the thing of it is that Brother Hay wants you to know you can make an impact for so easily. How many know that sometimes $1 was a lot for me to give them? Sometimes I get in trouble for giving away too much. But here's the flip side. I think it was always worth that dollar. Does that make sense? And so you can give because you're giving of yourself. So as we go through this, remember as we get back not next week, but the week after, we'll probably finish this up. But I want you to read through it, take it home, look it over, and you'll figure out real quick where Brother Hay is going. Don't get too excited or get too upset when you read things because I really do believe that we all have a ministry. I believe that with all my heart. Like I said, when we prayed with Deb and them before they left yesterday morning, you could feel the presence of the Lord. And they came here and they sang, playing the whatever you call the keyboard and stuff. And I watched my friend's son. You could tell his heart was broke because his daddy led singing forever. I mean, that's just who he was. And all the grandkids are able to sing. And I could tell that he kind of wanted to be over there with them. And he's a great singer on his own, just so you know. But I could tell he had that hurt spot. And I told him before he left, I said, listen, it's okay. I said, you know what? You have a lot to be proud of in your kids. I said, but the best way to honor your father is by maintaining your relationship with the Lord. And let Brother Hay tell you something. The best way to honor God is to maintain your relationship with Him. Because at the end of the day, all that matters really is that relationship. Because we never know when we're going to wake up and enter heaven. It could happen in a car accident. It could happen, it's just the race car driver. He was inside the little thing doing whatever and and doing practicing his racing on the machine. And you know what? Whatever happened, they called and he ended up at the hospital 41 years old. How many know that's pretty young? It's real young. And those things happen. And Sister Hay was reading this morning about a young person being killed in a car accident. And it happens all the time. But here's what Brother Hay wants to tell you. We have to be about the Father's business. And what's the most important thing you can do is to give yourself. And I'll close with this last thought. When Jesus heard the lepers crying, how many know what most people would have done? They've been like, somebody said, Jesus, do you hear that? Huh? Isn't that what most people would do? They'd be like, nope, I don't hear that. But do you remember what happened with Jesus? He stopped. How many know those people's lives were never the same? And isn't it amazing how many didn't even come back and say thank you? And most of them didn't, Brother Randy. And so what Brother Hay is telling you, when you give in the church, whether it's work or whatever you're doing or whatever ministry you have, or whether you're working with somebody outside the church, if it's a complete stranger, always remember this. The reason Jesus did it was because of his love for the Father and his love for them. The reason we should do it is our love for Jesus, and this is the hard part, and our love for them. If you would, you can stand with me. We'll pray. And I'll just tell you ahead of time, if you do have offering, you just put it in the basket. And I just want you to know that Brother Hay's glad that you're here. I appreciate all of you. And Brother Randy, if you come up here, Brother Michael, if you and Fred and Larry, if you come, I want to pray for Brother Randy before we go. If you ladies want to come, you can. Kaylee, you can turn that off, baby.